This session we're going to call God's Call to Compassion because it's important for us to get a biblical perspective of what we're talking about when we talk about the fundamentals of compassion, evangelism, and networking. In fact, John R. Mott, the Nobel Peace Prize recipient of the 1940s, has said that evangelism without social work is deficient, but social work without evangelism is impotent. He understood the importance that you don't have to give up one for the other. In fact, in Psalms chapter 89, verse 14, it says, righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. In other words, God's throne. Mercy and truth go before your face. Too often we think we have to give up our convictions of righteousness by doing social justice. And on the other degree, we think that we can't declare our convictions with righteousness and still do social justice. We need not give up one for the other. We don't have to give up the love of truth and righteousness to also be passionate about social justice and reconciliation and vice versa. So I want us to take a look at this for a moment because it's important for us not to separate the two, just like we don't separate prayer initiative and prayer from doing evangelism. I believe it's all one and the same. What I do has to be fueled out of the presence of God through communication with God. As the late Dr. Edwin Lewis Cole used to say, that prayer produces intimacy. Intimacy to whom you pray, with whom you pray in agreement, because we know that agreement is a place of power, and for whom you pray, those you're praying for, God begins to minister to. So it's important for us to realize we don't have to give up that place which is foundational. We have to be a people of prayer, a people of worship, so that what we do is fueled by intimacy with God, the presence of God, then we are now empowered when we go out to share the tangible expressions of God to the world. Matthew 5, verse 16 says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and bring glory to your Father in heaven. Let others see your light so shine. In other words, let them see a tangible expression of God in your life that others may see your good works. Is it your good works or is it empowered by the presence and the passion and the heart of God? It's empowered by the presence and passion and the heart of God. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and bring glory to your Father in heaven. Ultimately, it's all about bringing God the glory. Today, we see a lot of people who are doing social work and social justice without holding to righteousness and their convictions and love for truth. And without a love for truth, we're given to strong delusion, it says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. In fact, I love what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, and I think most of us would agree he was a great martyr, a great man who represented Christ, who lived his conviction to his very death before he was martyred in Nazi Germany. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said this, and I think this speaks to some of the areas where we think we have to give up righteousness when we begin to move in the areas of proclaiming grace and social work and social justice, but we don't have to. He says, cheap grace is the preaching of forgiveness without requiring repentance, baptism without church discipline, communion without confession, absolution without personal confession. He says, cheap grace is grace without discipleship, grace without the cross, grace without Jesus Christ. That's Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He also said, when the rulers are silent before injustice, then the evil hand of violence is not far off. What he's saying is when we're silent to the injustices, even in our declaration or proclamation of the gospel, without being a tangible expression of Christ to those around us, then what we're doing is not bringing forth true justice, but it's an evil hand of violence is not far off. We see today many who are trying to declare and proclaim and insert their righteousness, their version of truth, rather than getting back to the fundamentals and the foundations of God's truth. Psalms 82:4 says, rescue the poor and helpless. Deliver them from the grasp of evil people. Dietrich Bonhoeffer says also evil when the oppressed, the poor, deprived cry aloud unto heaven while the judges and lords, or can I add in there, leaders and pastors of the earth keep silent. It's our job to speak on behalf of those who cannot speak for themselves. I have found story after story, I've lived this out in 30 plus years, of the very ones who were resistant to the gospel, who saw the tangible expression of the gospel portrayed to them in the midst of their own crisis that drew their hearts, opened their minds to receive the message of good news from those of us that were presenting it. I have found individuals on streets of inner city of America, to communities around the world, third world countries, to even heads of state that were normally opposed to the gospel presentation, who in their time of need saw the church be the church. They opened their hearts, they opened their minds, and they presented themselves in such a way in humility that says, tell me about this gospel you speak of. It's important for us, the church, to understand what God's call to compassion is, and we'll continue that in the next session.